Don't drink that, sir. Please, don't touch the glass. Grayson Aldwell stood at the head of the Meridian's private dining deck, a crystal flute of anniversary champagne lifted halfway to his lips. The evening had taken 4 months to plan. 40 years of Aldwell and Associates. 40 years of cases won, partnerships forged, a firm that had become one of the most respected litigation practices on the Eastern Seaboard. Tonight was the firm's night, and this toast was its centerpiece. He lowered the glass a fraction of an inch. Near the service corridor that separated the dining deck from the galley stairs, Ruth Osey, the yacht's head steward, went rigid with a tray in her hands. She found her son across the room before she had taken a single step. "Emmett," she said, her voice low and moving through the crowd like a blade through still water. "Come here, right now." But Emmett did not move. He was 10 years old and small for it, standing at the edge of the dining deck in a pressed white shirt 3 sizes too large. A shirt borrowed from a junior deckhand because he was not supposed to be up here at all. He was supposed to be 2 decks below, watching a movie on his mother's tablet, waiting for her shift to end. "He put something in it," Emmett said. "I saw him do it in the kitchen." 31 of the most accomplished attorneys in the Northeast turned to look at a 10-year-old boy standing beside a silver drink cart. Desmond Farrell rose slowly from his chair at the right hand of the head table. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, and wore the kind of tailored suit that said he had never once in his adult life been the smallest person in a room. For 28 years, he had been Grayson's founding partner, the man who had argued the firm's first landmark case, the man whose name appeared second on the letterhead, whose portrait hung beside Grayson's in the lobby, whose opinion Grayson had trusted on every major decision for nearly 3 decades. Now he looked at the child the way a man looks at something that has startled him without quite earning his concern, mildly, almost amused. "I'm sorry," Desmond said, not to Emmett but to the room. "Did a child just walk in and tell Grayson not to drink his own toast?" A few uncertain laughs moved through the nearest tables. Ruth reached Emmett and put both hands on his shoulders. "Mr. Aldwell, Mr. Farrell, I am so sorry. He was supposed to be below. He knows he's not allowed up here during events." She bent toward Emmett, her voice dropping. "Baby, come with me, right now." "I saw him," Emmett said. He did not move. Mr. Farrell was in the kitchen. He had a small bottle. He put something in the glass before the server brought it up. "The tall glass with the blue ribbon on the stem, that one." He pointed. "That's the one they put in front of Mr. Aldwell." The blue ribbon on the crystal stem caught the light of the overhead lanterns. Every head at the table turned toward the flute in Grayson's hand. Desmond pressed a hand to his chest as though the accusation itself were a physical injury. "Grayson," he said, still addressing the room more than the child. "I was in the galley because I went to check on the kitchen staff. The sommelier asked me to confirm the vintage. I do it before every major toast. You know this, I have done it for 40 years. "He didn't talk to the sommelier," Emmett said. The sommelier was cutting garnish by the window. Mr. Farrell was at the back counter by himself. He opened his jacket pocket and took out something small. Clear, he tipped a little into the glass and swirled it. A woman near the center of the table, Grayson's senior associate, Frederica Holst, leaned toward the man beside her and whispered something. The man replied just loudly enough that several people heard it. "Kid probably wants to be part of the evening. His mother works here." Another voice, kinder but no less dismissive. "Children imagine things at events like this, all the excitement." Ruth heard both, her jaw set, but her eyes stayed down. Emmett heard them too. Something in his small face hardened with the specific dignity of a child who understands he is not being believed and has not yet decided whether that changes what he does next. "I'm not imagining," he said. "I was on the stairs behind the partition. I was looking at the harbor lights. I saw the whole thing." Grayson Aldwell studied the boy for a long moment. He was 63 years old and had spent 4 decades reading people across courtroom tables. He had learned over that time to be very careful about what he called instinct and what was actually preference wearing the same coat. "Emmett," he said carefully, "look at me." The boy did. "Are you sure it was this glass?" "Yes, sir. It's the only one with a blue ribbon. The ribbon was already on it when he poured into it. He put the ribbon on himself before the server came." Every eye in the room moved to the ribbon. It was silk, a thin decorative detail that separated the head table's toast glass from the standard flutes on the surrounding tables. No one else had a ribbon on their glass. Desmond followed the gaze with practiced calm. "I tied that ribbon on," he said, "because I wanted your glass to stand out. Tonight is your night, Grayson. 40 years, I thought the detail was a nice touch. I did not realize that it would become evidence in a child's story." He turned toward Ruth. "Mrs. Osey, I think perhaps your son has been up past the hour that's good for him." Another quiet laugh moved through the nearest tables. Ruth lowered her voice. "Emmett, sweetheart, please, come with me and let the guests enjoy their evening." Emmett looked at his mother. Then he looked at Grayson. Then he did something that no one at the table expected. He moved. Before Ruth could catch him, before the nearest associate could step forward, Emmett crossed the dining deck in 7 quick steps and put both hands around the crystal flute in Grayson's hand. He did not pull. He simply held on, his small fingers wrapped beneath Grayson's palm, and looked up. "Please," he said quietly, "please don't drink it." The room went completely still. Desmond stood. "This is absurd." "Emmett," Ruth's voice broke at the edge of the word. Grayson looked down at the boy's hands on the glass. He looked at the blue ribbon. He looked at the 31 faces watching him from around the table, most of them wearing expressions that landed somewhere between embarrassment and expectation, the way people look when they want a scene to end gracefully. He made a decision he would spend the next 12 hours wishing he had made differently. "Son," Grayson said gently, "let go of the glass." Emmett's grip tightened by a fraction. "Emmett, let go." The boy held on for 2 more seconds. Then slowly his hands released. Grayson set the glass down on the table. Not to drink it. He set it down. The room seemed to understand that this was not the same as dismissal, even if it looked like it from a distance. Desmond clearly understood. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not panic, not yet, but a careful recalibration, the way a practiced man adjusts when a variable moves unexpectedly. "Grayson," Desmond said, his voice smooth again. "This has been a remarkable evening, and I think we've all had enough excitement for one toast. Why don't we simply move on?" "Who tied the ribbon?" Grayson asked. Desmond paused. "You said you tied it. When?" "I just told you, before the server." "Ruth," Grayson said, without looking away from Desmond, "who sets the glassware for the head table before an event?" Ruth hesitated. "We do, sir, my team. The glasses are set out an hour before guests arrive." "And the ribbons?" "We don't use ribbons, sir. We never have. I don't know where that ribbon came from." Another silence, longer than the first. Lenora Aldwell, Grayson's younger sister, sat 3 seats to his left. She was 57 and had attended every firm anniversary for 20 years in the same capacity, as the person in the room who noticed everything Grayson was too polite to notice first. She had not spoken yet. Now she leaned forward slightly and looked at the ribbon, then at Desmond, then at her brother. "Grayson," she said quietly, "don't touch the glass again." A man near the opposite end of the table rose from his chair. Dr. Hartley Spence was the firm's retained physician, present at every major Aldwell event at his own insistence after Grayson's cardiac episode 6 years prior, an episode that had since resolved completely, though Spence had never fully updated his caution. He was deliberate and had the particular composure of a man who had delivered bad news enough times to know that stillness was its own kind of authority. "May I see it?" he said, nodding toward the glass. Desmond moved first. "Hartley, this is completely unnecessary. The boy is 10. He was unsupervised in a staff kitchen and saw something he misunderstood." "Then the glass will confirm that," Spence said, already moving around the table. Desmond reached for the flute. "Don't." Lenora's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Desmond stopped. Spence lifted the glass carefully by the base, avoiding the rim and the ribbon. He held it to the nearest lantern and tilted it slowly. The champagne moved against the crystal in a way that was almost imperceptibly wrong. Thicker than it should have been at the surface, with a slow return after the tilt that sparkling wine did not produce. He set the glass down. He looked at Emmett. "What color was the bottle?" he asked. Emmett thought. "Clear, small, like a medicine bottle but smaller, with a white cap." Spence looked at Grayson. "I would like the galley kitchen secured immediately, and I'd like the security camera footage from the last 90 minutes pulled." "For a child's fantasy," Desmond said. "For confirmation," Spence said. "If you're right, Desmond, the cameras will show exactly that." The dining deck shifted. Guests who had been watching with social discomfort now watched with a different quality of attention. The sound of the harbor, the water against the hull, the distant channel markers, suddenly filled the space between people in a way it had not before. Haddon Cross, the yacht's security director, was already moving toward the service corridor. He had spent 19 years on private vessels and had learned to read rooms the way navigators read weather. He secured the galley stairs, posted staff at the kitchen entrance, and pulled the camera feed on his tablet in the side corridor. He spent 90 seconds scrolling. Then he stopped. He came back to the table and placed the tablet in front of Grayson, without comment. The footage was clear, Timestamp, 7:42 p.m. Desmond Farrell in the galley kitchen, jacket on, standing at the back counter while two kitchen staff worked at the far end near the porthole. His back was partially to the nearest camera, but not well enough. His right hand came out of his inner jacket pocket holding something small and clear. His left hand lifted a single crystal flute, the only one on the counter beside the silver tray set aside for the head table. He tipped the small bottle. He swirled the glass once. He set it down. Then he reached into the same pocket and produced a thin blue ribbon and tied it around the stem. The table was absolutely still. Grayson watched the footage twice. He set the tablet down. He looked at Desmond. Desmond Farrell had spent 35 years as a trial attorney and had not once given a jury the satisfaction of watching him flinch. He sat with his hands folded on the white linen tablecloth and looked at his partner of 28 years across the length of the anniversary dinner, and his face told nothing at all. "You'd take a timestamp," Desmond said, "over 28 years. "I'd take the timestamp," Grayson said. The glass was wrapped and sealed by Haddon's team within minutes. The yacht's anchor held. No one was leaving the vessel. Emmett stood beside his mother near the service corridor, his arms at his sides, the borrowed white shirt untucked now where he'd moved quickly across the deck. He did not look triumphant. He looked the way a child looks when he has been carrying something very heavy for a long time, and someone has finally, carefully, taken part of it from his hands. Ruth held him close. She said nothing. There was nothing yet to say. At the hospital where Grayson was taken an hour later. Not because he had drunk anything, but because Spence insisted on a precautionary full panel given his cardiac history. The analysis of the champagne glass came back at 11:30. The substance was not a poison. It was a fast-acting sedative compound, pharmaceutical grade, designed to produce a state of significant cognitive impairment within 20 minutes of ingestion. Enough to make a person compliant, confused, cooperative in the way people become cooperative when they no longer fully understand what they are agreeing to. Not enough, in a single measured dose in a single glass, to produce anything that would look like anything other than a man who had too much to drink at his own anniversary party. Spence relayed this to Grayson in the private consultation room, with Lenora present. "If you had drunk it," Spence said, "you would have been noticeably impaired by 8:15, seated, unclear, possibly emotional. Not enough to alarm a physician at a glance. Exactly enough for someone to guide you through a few signatures without resistance." Lenora said, "Signatures." Spence nodded once. It was Haddon who found them. In the leather portfolio Desmond had brought aboard, a portfolio everyone had assumed contained the anniversary program notes, the remarks prepared for the evening toast. There were 7 pages of legal documents, a restructuring amendment to the partnership agreement, a temporary managing authority provision, effective upon medical incapacitation of the senior partner, a transfer authorization for the firm's primary holding accounts with a successor designation already filled in, and a signature line at the bottom of each page. Lenora read them in the order Haddon handed them to her. When she finished, she folded them carefully and looked at her brother with an expression that was very quiet and very precise. "He was going to walk you through them one at a time," she said, "while you didn't know what you were reading." Grayson said nothing for a moment. He was looking at the ceiling of the consultation room in the particular way people look when they are replaying a sequence of events they cannot quite reconcile with what they believe to be true about a person. "There's a buyer," he said finally. "There would be," Lenora said. Haddon set a second folder on the table, 3 names. A private equity group that had approached Aldwell and Associates twice in the past 4 years with acquisition proposals Grayson had declined each time, clearly publicly with reasoning he had not disguised. The same group whose representative Desmond had begun bringing to firm dinners 18 months prior. The same representative whose number appeared in Desmond's call log 4 times in the 3 days before the anniversary gala. 2 of the 3 names were in the city this week, Haddon said. They checked out of their hotel this afternoon. "Before the gala," Lenora said. "Before the gala." Grayson closed his eyes. 28 years of partnership. Of being the first call after a difficult verdict. Of splitting every hard decision down the middle because they had agreed, long ago, that the firm belonged to both of them equally, and that no one person's judgment was infallible. He had believed that. He had built his professional life on the foundation of it. "He didn't want me dead," Grayson said. "No," Haddon said, "he wanted you to sign." A dead senior partner creates legal complexity. An incapacitated one who has already signed the restructuring documents creates a fait accompli. Lenora held the folded pages against the table. He had everything ready. The documents, the signatures, a notary he could reach by phone within the hour. All he needed was 20 minutes with you, while you thought you were simply enjoying your champagne. Grayson opened his eyes. He looked at the door. "Where is Ruth Osei?" Ruth was in the waiting area with Emmett. She had not asked to be anywhere else, and no one had thought to move her. She sat in the plastic chair nearest the corridor with her son beside her, his head leaning against her arm, the borrowed white shirt retucked now because she had fixed it while they waited. Grayson came through the door with his cane. His right knee had needed it for 2 years, and he had brought it aboard tonight against his own preference, and found them before he found anyone else. Ruth stood immediately. "Mr. Aldwell, I'm so sorry for what happened. If there's anything I can do to—" "Sit down, Ruth," he said. She sat. He lowered himself into the chair across from Emmett. The boy looked at him with the careful, measuring look of a child who has been surprised enough times by adult behavior that he no longer assumes any particular outcome. "Emmett," Grayson said. "Yes, sir. What made you come up to the dining deck tonight? You were supposed to be below." Emmett considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "I wanted to see the harbor lights from the upper deck. They're better from up there. I knew the party was on the main deck, so I thought the upper one would be empty." He paused. "I went through the galley stairs because it was the shortest way. That's when I saw him." "And you knew something was wrong?" Emmett thought again. He looked at the door first, before he took the bottle out. "The same way I look at the door when I take an extra cookie." He said this without apology. People who aren't doing anything wrong don't look at the door first. Lenora, who had followed Grayson into the waiting area, made a quiet sound that was not quite a laugh. Grayson said, "You tried to warn me 3 times." "3 times, Emmett confirmed. "I told my mom first on the stairs, but she was carrying a tray. Then I said it in front of everyone. Then I held onto the glass." Ruth pressed her lips together and looked at the far wall. "And I took the glass back from you," Grayson said, "and told you to let go, in front of everyone." Emmett met his eyes. He did not look away. He did not say anything either. He had the kind of restraint that children develop when they learn early that certain truths have a cost. "That was my failure," Grayson said, "not yours. I put you in a room full of people who outranked you by every measure most adults use, and I made you feel, for a few minutes, like none of it had mattered. That was wrong, and I want you to hear me say that directly." Ruth's hand moved to her son's back. Emmett looked at Grayson for a long moment. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I didn't drink anything," Grayson said, "because of you." Emmett nodded slowly, weighing this. "Okay," he said. Desmond Farrell was taken off the Meridian at 12:40 a.m. by 2 officers who had arrived by Harbor Patrol. He was cooperative in the precise, managed way of a man who had spent his career being cooperative with authority, while simultaneously working against it. He did not look at Grayson as he was guided past him. He looked at the water. The harbor was dark and quiet, and offered nothing back. Grayson watched him go from the gangway. He had known this man for longer than either of his marriages. He had trusted him with clients, with strategy, with the things you say to a partner at the end of a hard-won verdict that you don't say to anyone else. He thought about every case they had built together. Every morning they had stood before juries and argued for the truth. And he understood, in the cold clarity of a late harbor night, that Desmond had probably never believed in the truth so much as he had believed in being exceptionally skilled at deploying it. The partnership amendment was voided before dawn. The equity group's deal collapsed before their attorneys could begin drafting. 2 of the 3 representatives had retained counsel by the time Haddon made contact to confirm their status as persons of interest. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon when October light came in low through the tall windows of the Aldwell & Associates lobby, Grayson called Ruth Osei into his office and asked her to bring Emmett if school was finished. Emmett sat in the chair across from the senior partner's desk with the self-possession of someone who had already survived the hardest version of this room. Ruth sat beside him. Grayson slid a folder across the desk. Ruth opened it. Inside was a letter from the firm's foundation, an educational trust in Emmett's name, full funding through university, with a provision for graduate school. Beneath that, a second document, an appointment letter naming Ruth Osei as Director of Estate and Venue Operations for Aldwell & Associates, at a salary that was not what a head steward earned. Ruth read both documents twice. Then she set them down very carefully on the desk and looked at Grayson. "Sir," she said, "this is more than." "It is the smallest version of what's right," Grayson said. "I'm aware of that." Ruth pressed her lips together. She did not cry, because she was a woman who had learned, in the way women in her position learn, that certain rooms required a different kind of composure. But her hand found her son's on the arm of the chair, and she held it. Grayson looked at Emmett. "I've been a lawyer for 40 years, he said. I have watched some very accomplished people perform under pressure. Witnesses, clients, opposing counsel, people who had every reason in the world to speak the truth and found 100 reasons not to." He paused. "You walked into a room full of people who had every credential to dismiss you, and you held on to that glass with both hands." Emmett thought about this for a moment the way he thought about everything, carefully, without rush. "It didn't feel brave," he said honestly. "It felt like the only thing to do." "That," Grayson said, "is exactly what it feels like." The folder sat open on the desk between them. Through the tall lobby windows, the city moved in its ordinary way, unbothered, continuous, full of people who would never know that the previous month a 10-year-old boy in a borrowed white shirt had looked at a closed kitchen door and understood something 31 attorneys had not. In a courtroom across the city, the case against Desmond Farrell was beginning the slow, careful work that trials require. His attorney was skilled. The evidence was better. And somewhere in the record of that proceeding, preserved in camera footage and chemical analysis, and the testimony of a child who had stood in front of a dining deck full of the wrong people and refused to let go, was a plain and undecorated fact. That the most important thing said at the 40th anniversary of a great law firm had been said by the smallest person in the building, in a voice no one had wanted to hear. And that the man who had finally listened, even one critical minute late, was the only reason the rest of the evening had been worth remembering at all.